Let's discuss your lifestyles as British Asian. Hello, welcome to Chai with Ritu. Once again this evening, we are here discussing another issue which is really important to British Indians generally. The series of Chai with Ritu shows are all about the journey that British Indians are having in this country. We came in this country, well, our forefathers came in the 60s and 70s. The young generation, that was part of us, we came here embracing a Western educational system, Western values, but also keeping the traditional Eastern values well and truly at home and ingrained in us. So growing up with these two values in this country, what we're doing is exploring where we're at today, our journey in this country, now as second, third generation British Indians. What I want you to do is grab yourself a cup of chai, grab the phone and call us with your views and your experiences on the program today, the program that we will be discussing, Stop and Search Rules. The number is 0871 990 3399. I'd like you to call in after 10 minutes of actually hearing what our guests have to say today. Our two guests, distinguished gentlemen here, is David Tucker and Salish Mehta. Salish Mehta is from the Bar Council, from Two Hare Court. He's a very prominent member of council. He has conducted many cases. He's also the chair of the Society of Asian Lawyers and sits as also on the Bar Council for, is it for the disciplinary hearings?
Disciplinary hearings and the Race Relations Committee.
Yeah, well done. And also I have with me David Tucker. Now I must get your title right because it's a very long title. I could abbreviate it, but it's Chief Superintendent David Tucker, Head of the National Community Tension Team for the Association of Chief Police Officers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, what we're discussing today is the stop and search rules. It's a very controversial subject, but it is a power that the police need in order to conduct their duties and their functions as efficiently as possible. However, it's a double-edged sword because the perception is that Asians get targeted. Now, do you feel you get targeted? Do you get stopped and searched? Have you been stopped and searched unnecessarily by the police? We want to hear from you. The number is 0871 990 3399. Now, what we want to really hear, first of all, is from David Tucker. Do you think this statement that Asians are being targeted that unduly with the stop and search rules, is that a valid comment, or do you think it is just a perception that they might have?
I think there's a danger in trying to deal with perceptions as being anything different from experience. If people feel scared, they change their behaviour because they feel that they're going to be unfairly targeted by the police, that's something that we've got to be concerned about. I think it's important to talk just briefly about the stop and search powers and perhaps give them a bit of context.
Yeah.
Essentially, there are three types. The first one relates to activity to prevent things like theft and people going equipped to cause damage. For those sorts of power, for that sort of stop and search, each police officer has the power to carry that search out if he or she reasonably suspects the person to have some items that they shouldn't have.
Okay, so let's just look at reasonably suspects. I mean, could it be a hunch? Could it just be that they think they might have?
No, it's pretty well prescribed in our codes of practice, which has the force of law, which says that we are looking for objective factors, so real evidence of behaviour, real information from other sources, things that would make you suspicious about that particular individual, which have to then be quantifiable. You have to be able to write them down afterwards and say what it was that drew your attention to that individual.
So what are the guidelines? What do the police actually look for? I mean, if a man is walking down the street, okay, let's have a scenario. You've got an English, you've got a non-English, a brown person walking down. What is it you're looking for?
Well, in those circumstances, you might be looking for somebody in connection with a specific crime, which may have just happened, and a member of the public has said, I've seen this crime being committed, and here is a description of the suspect or suspects that we're looking for. In the circumstances you describe, it would be unusual, I would have thought, to only search one of those two individuals, because even if the description is of the brown-skinned person, the fact that they're now with another person would make them also to be suspected, because it may be a joint endeavour. It might have been that the person's a lookout. It might be that any stolen property has been transferred from one person to the other.
Okay, so that's the first ground. Second?
Yes. So that's the first one, which is reasonable suspicion around general criminal activity. Then we have another power under the Crime and Disorder Act to stop and search people where we anticipate immediate violence.
Right.
And that is a power that is authorised by a senior officer in a particular location.
So that's a Criminal Disorder Act.
That's right. So
Yeah.
you might have something like you've got information about a gang fight, or there's something that's just happened outside a school, and you fear that that might turn into something more serious. A senior police officer would authorise a search, and then everybody in that area will be we can search everybody in that area if they fulfil certain criteria. So the
Okay.
individual officer doesn't need to suspect anything. The officer authorising does.
Right.
And then the third type, which I think is the most contentious and is the one that where I'm certainly hearing that Asian people feel that they're being unfairly targeted, is around Terrorism Act, Section 44 of the Terrorism Act, which allows an assistant, a chief constable or an assistant commissioner in London to authorise police to search anybody to find out if they're terrorists. So no suspicion, just authorised for a particular area.
Right. And would they have a description of someone then?
No,
Right.
no.
So they would just target. How would they target?
Well, this is where the controversy comes. What we would be acting on is the intelligence that tells us around where we think terrorists might be operating, the sorts of areas that they would be interested in carrying out their activities.
Right.
And fairly obviously, you know, the ones where you might be looking at the moment are around, you know, on the transport infrastructure, for instance. So in and around those areas, you might find yourself getting stopped and searched under terrorism provisions. And as I say, the individual officer doesn't need to have reasonable suspicion. Once it's authorised by a senior officer, that officer can stop and search anybody in the area where that has been authorised. And clearly at the moment, this is not activity that takes place in a vacuum. There is a severe threat of terrorism to this country, and we have to take measures to prevent terrorist attacks happening. And so we work on the intelligence in relation to where we carry out stop and search, but in relation to the individuals, we are not dealing with intelligence.
Right. Sailesh, what's your views on this? Do you think these laws are just, or do you think that reasonable cause could mean anything?
Well, there is an objective element, obviously, but there's always going to be a subjective element. In that I've done cases where officers have been cross-examined by me, and I've asked them, why did you stop this person at this time? And of course, it's very easy for an officer, if he wants to say that he was looking suspicious. Next question, why do you say he was looking suspicious? Well, he kept on looking over his shoulder.
Wow.
Now, unless you've got other evidence to contradict that, that would ordinarily be enough, especially if it's allied to some information about a recent burglary in the area, for example, or a car being stolen. And so there is always a subjective element. The real tension at the moment, of course, is in relation to the Terrorism Act. And as the officer says, there is now no need for suspicion. So the sus laws, as some people call them, in fact no longer exist in relation to that legislation. You just are allowed a blanket authority to stop anyone that you want. And there's always going to be a tension there between the right of the citizen to go about his lawful business without being stopped, and of course the right of the state to do what the state deems necessary to protect itself. And really the question is, how is it done? Is it being done sensitively? And is it being done in a way that the reception of it is unfair? And of course the perception of it and the reception by the community, if the perception is that this is unfair, then it doesn't matter what the rationale for it is. It doesn't matter that there may be an objective reason for this blanket authority, because the community feels this is wrong. And so that's really the tension.
Can someone do if they get stopped unfairly, or they think it's unfairly? What can they do? Where do they complain?
Well, they can go to the local police station and complain to the senior officer on duty there,
Yeah.
or you can
Well,
send a
that'd be
letter.
after the event.
Of course, or you can send a letter in and complain. I mean, doing things at the time is very difficult because, you know, if you are dealing with stop and search under the Terrorism Act, all the officer has to say is, I'm stopping you under the Terrorism Act, and really that sort of is end of discussion on that point, because they don't need to have any further grounds. And I think that that the points that we made so far are absolutely right. It's a question of what the support is within the community for what the police are doing, and I think that we have to make we have to understand that this is not a discussion about opposites. It's not a question of whether you do or whether you don't. It's the circumstances in which you do it, and to understand that it's part of a menu of activities that are taking place to make people safe.
Okay, well, we want to hear your views. You've heard from our two guests here, and we will continue the conversation with them after the break. But if you've ever been stopped and you want to discuss what it was or anything particular to your experience, we want to hear from you. Number is 0871 990 3399. We will see you after the break. Thank you.
Above all else, Tilda is pure traditional basmati.
हनुमान ज्योतिष मंदिर अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ख्याति प्राप्त पंडित राम प्रकाश जी आजकल इंग्लैंड में हैं। पंडित जी ज्योतिष विद्या और हस्तरेखा में निपुण हैं। वे आपको विवाह, पारिवारिक जीवन, संतान, दाम्पत्य जीवन, प्यार, व्यापार और कई समस्याओं के बारे में सलाह देंगे। ज्यादा जानकारी के लिए संपर्क करें 2 क्लेरमंट रोड, कैप हिल, स्मिथिक, बर्मिंघम B66 4JZ, ऑपोजिट आजडा। या अपॉइंटमेंट के लिए अभी कॉल कीजिए 0121 558 4470।
At the SETI Partnership Solicitors, we can advise on all your legal matters. We're a leading law firm that specialises in giving sound advice on matters that affect your everyday life. Think of a firm of solicitors, think of the SETI Partnership Solicitors. Call us on 0208 866 64 64.
The SETI Partnership, we are in partnership with our clients.
ਹੁਸਨ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਓ ਕਰੀਏ ਪੰਜ ਦਰਿਆਵਾਂ ਦੀ ਧਰਤੀ ਤੇ ਹੁਸਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ। ਗਿੱਧੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉੱਡਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਡੋਰੀਏ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ। ਭੰਗੜਾ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਗੱਭਰੂਆਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ। ਆਪਣੇ ਸੱਭਿਆਚਾਰ, ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਰਸੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਰ ਕਰਾਂਗੀ ਹਰ ਸ਼ੁੱਕਰਵਾਰ ਸ਼ਾਮੀ 7 ਵਜੇ।
I went to see how Eastern process their spices. The spices are microbiologically tested and stored in temperature-controlled conditions. Before grinding, spices are cleaned and impurities taken out. Because they are milled in UK, East End spices are pure and have a beautiful aroma. UK ground and packed. Resealable packs keep spices fresh. East End spices, there's nothing better.
Hello, welcome back to Chai with Ritu. I hope you've got yourself a cup of chai and the phone. Our number is 0871 990 3399. We want to hear from you about the stop and search rules if you've ever been in that situation or you want to just discuss your opinions on it. Please give us a call. Now we are discussing with the police officer here and Salish method the whole scenario and the whole way people get stopped. But did it really take a brutal murder in 1993 of Stephen Lawrence to actually open up the whole debate and the race relations between the police and the public? That was now some 13 years ago. Do you think things have changed somewhat since then, Mr. Tucker?
Well, I certainly do. I mean, I think that the Stephen Lawrence Inquiry Report, which was published in 1999, completely changed the way in which the police service deals with a whole range of issues.
They actually put the police in the dock, didn't they?
They did. They did. I mean, it was a really, really uncomfortable time for us, and I think, as I say, I think the police service has changed immeasurably since then across a whole range of issues. Not least of which, of course, was the Recommendation 61, which has required the police to record all stops and encounters, so not just stop and search, but any encounters with the public.
So how long would you keep that document, especially if it's an encounter, because someone who's never been in trouble with the police suddenly finds that their name is being recorded? The first thing they want to ask lawyers like us is, how long can they keep them for?
Well, I think it's for 7 years. I wasn't anticipating that question. I think it's 6 or 7 years, but as with all of our case papers.
Even if it's not taken any further?
Yes, but then somebody may then come back for that piece of information at some stage in the future. For instance, if somebody subsequently wants to make a complaint. So it cuts both ways. That it's a question of accountability for the police officer making the stop and search or stop and account, but also in relation to any intelligence or indeed in eliminating people from inquiries.
So you would keep that document
Yes.
for 7 years, even if they have not actually breached any regulations and broken any laws.
Yeah.
What's your views on that, Salish?
Well, the perception might be that that's an unjustified
Well, isn't it
interference
just?
with
Yeah.
one's right not to have that sort of information being kept upon you, especially if, having been stopped and searched, etc., the conclusion is, well, nothing came of it. And so I can understand that if you are someone that's been stopped and searched, well, you would be a little apprehensive as to what will happen to that information. And so if there was a little more transparency, if there was more by way of explanation of exactly what's going to happen to that information and what can and can't be done, that might at least allay some of the worries and fears that people have.
And who actually polices the police?
Well, there's the Independent Police Complaints Commission.
Right.
And
Let's take this call. Sorry, excuse me. Hello, who's calling Chai with Ritu? Yeah, you're going to have to speak up.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, speak
Yeah,
up.
I'm calling from Southwood. My name is Chaz.
You're calling from South Woodford. Your name is Chaz, yes?
Yeah, I'm just with regards to the issue of things that's great. I mean, the area that I'm from is fairly peaceful and well-respected area.
You're from a well-respected area. I'm just going to repeat because it's difficult to catch everything you're saying unless you really shout.
Okay, hold on. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Yeah, okay. Basically, the area that I live in
Yes.
is quite peaceful and well-respected area, so we never have problems with the stopping and searching issues.
Okay.
And I don't know if this has anything to do with the fact that police may be aware of this fact, because I've never seen any police actually hardly ever around this area anyway stopping.
In Woodford.
Yeah,
So you haven't seen many police around that area.
no, not at all, hardly. We're not patrolling the streets.
So are you grateful for that?
Well, to be honest with you, the fact that there's not many police officers there shows that this is quite a safe area, and maybe we don't need so much police patrolling the streets, but it's always good to see officers there just so you know you're safe.
Okay, so you're happy with the policing you have. They know your space and therefore they're not encroaching on it.
Yeah.
Is that the point you're making?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that.
Okay.
And keep watching.
That's a good
thank you
positive
very much.
start.
Well,
yes,
there we are. We have a
unexpected.
caller who says that he doesn't see the police and he's quite happy with that in South Woodford. So we'd like to hear your views. Number is 0871 990 3399 and your experiences. Okay, going back to the subject of the Lawrence inquiry and Macpherson's report. That report was out in 1999 and the police were making gradual changes, I think, as a result of that. But then after that with the 7/7 bombings. And I remember reading then, and there was a lot of controversy about a brown person being shot 8 times. And did it really take 8 bullets to kill him, or did it take 1 bullet? And the rest, 7, were hate bullets. And this is a general consensus of brown people, not Asians, not Indian, just Brazilian and his family. So what was the police's reaction on that?
Talking about you're talking about the de Menezes shooting.
Yes.
There is still an inquiry going on into that, and I don't really want to discuss it. It's as I say, it's still subject of an inquiry by the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and I wouldn't want to jump to conclusions about that. The only thing I would say is that the Independent Police Complaints Commission have released 1 report on that already and have concluded that the officers involved in that should not be prosecuted. The Met Police should be prosecuted and is being prosecuted for breaches of health and safety law. Frankly, I struggle with that as a conclusion, but
Health and safety.
But
on
health
whose
and
part?
safety. So the organisation is being prosecuted for its part in that, but the individuals who took the decisions were found not to have acted outside or in a criminal way.
Okay, so did it really take 8 bullets then?
Well, I can only refer you to the Independent Police Complaints Commission report. If they felt that that had been excessive force, then they would have recorded that. I think that you have to remember what the circumstances were on the 22nd of July when that incident happened. That we had an attack on the London Underground on the 7th of July, so 2 weeks and 1 day before that, where 52 people had been killed. And then after that, 2 weeks later, the day before, we had another attack, 4 people trying to blow up, allegedly, because there's a trial on that as well, so I've got to be careful about that. But allegedly there is a plot to blow up, to carry out a very similar operation that we saw on the 7th of July. And police officers were operating in that circumstance in quite a highly charged atmosphere. And as I say, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, which is made up of independent investigators and people who have no connection to the police service, they concluded through their investigation that the individual officers should not be prosecuted for criminal offences.
Right, and that is how it rests at the moment.
That's how it rests at the moment, and there is, as I say, there is another inquiry that's ongoing, which is around the role of the Commissioner in after the event and the information that went into the public domain. But I think it's important to realise that the Independent Police Complaints Commission is independent of the police. There is people there who used to be part of Liberty, the human rights organisation, who are part of the Independent Police Complaints Commission. If they would have satisfied themselves about the intentions of the officers, and they concluded that it wasn't criminal.
Okay, well, after the break, I'd like to hear your views on that, Salish, and your views. As viewers at home, please ring 0871 990 3399. We'd like to hear your views after the break. Thank you.
भागवती केरला ज्योतिष जग मशहूर पंडित तुलसीदास आजकल लेस्टर में है। ज्योतिष विद्या में निपुण पंडित तुलसीदास हस्तरेखा और कुंडली के जरिए आपका भूत, वर्तमान और भविष्य काल बता सकते हैं। साथ में संतान, दाम्पत्य जीवन, कारोबार, शिक्षण, घर शांति, आपके कई निजी और अनसुलझे प्रश्नों और समस्याओं को योग्य मार्गदर्शन देकर सुलझा सकते हैं। पंडित जी हिंदी, तमिल, तेलुगु, मलयालम और कन्नड़ा भाषा में बात कर सकते हैं। ज्यादा जानकारी के लिए संपर्क करें श्री पंडित तुलसीदास, 106 वेमथ स्ट्रीट, सनातन मंदिर के नजदीक, लेस्टर। टेलीफोन 0116 266 2539 और 07944253155।
प्लैनेट टॉक के साथ इंडिया भर में कहीं भी फोन करें सिर्फ 5 पेंस पर मिनट में। प्रॉम्प्ट के बाद अपना डेस्टिनेशन नंबर मिलाएं और बस आप कनेक्टेड हैं। तो अभी डायल कीजिए 084455000100। कहीं से भी कॉल कीजिए, ऑफिस, मोबाइल, घर या पे फोन। तो अभी डायल कीजिए और बिना किसी रुकावट के बात कीजिए सिर्फ 5 पेंस पर मिनट में। ना कोई अकाउंट, ना क्रेडिट कार्ड और ना ही कोई बिल। ये है प्लैनेट टॉक 084455000100।
अजमेरी बाबा, आपके मुश्किल हालात में आपके मददगार। अगर आपके घरेलू हालात या फिर इंसानी रिश्ते किसी मुश्किल दौर से गुजर रहे हैं, परेशानी हो रही है, एक अच्छे जीवन साथी की तलाश है, अजमेरी बाबा जी एक लंबे अरसे से सही मशवरे के जरिए लोगों की खिदमत करते आ रहे हैं। आज ही फोन कीजिए अजमेरी बाबा जी को ऑन 0777 913 7810 पर।
Hello, I'm Kuldeep Vora, and I'm going to take you through a journey of very interesting mouth-watering dishes in Cook with Kuldeep. You know, we are all busy, but we want good food, and there is no need to sacrifice taste or flavor. This is the show where you can also participate. If you send me a recipe and we include it in the show, you'll get an excellent food hamper. Don't forget to watch this cookery show only on MATV.
Hi, my name's Balbir Nandra, and I'm here to discuss about your health on a brand new program called Your Health on MATV.
ਹੁਸਨ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਓ ਕਰੀਏ 5 ਦਰਿਆਵਾਂ ਦੀ ਧਰਤੀ ਤੇ ਹੁਸਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ। ਗਿੱਧੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉੱਡਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਡੋਰੀਏ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ, ਭੰਗੜਾ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਗੱਭਰੂਆਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ, ਆਪਣੇ ਸੱਭਿਆਚਾਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਰਸੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਇੰਤਜ਼ਾਰ ਕਰਾਂਗੀ ਹਰ ਸ਼ੁੱਕਰਵਾਰ ਸ਼ਾਮੀ 7 ਵਜੇ
Hello, welcome back to Chai with Ritu. I hope you're enjoying your cup of chai this Tuesday evening. Don't forget to call us on 0871 990 3399. We want to hear your views and your experiences on the topic that we are discussing today, which is stop and search and police powers generally. And if you've had any experiences or any views or opinions on this subject, please call us. We are waiting for your call. But in the meantime, we have two guests in the studio today, David Tucker and Salish Mehta, and we're in the middle of a discussion, and I was going to give you the right to actually reply to what was said before the break on the independent police report.
I thought I'd very briefly put the opposite point of view.
Yes.
That there is genuine sense of outrage as to what's happened. It's a shocking incident. And what is shocking is not just the fact of the shooting with so many bullets, etc., but all the points in the lead up to the shooting. And I think the public rightly wants to know exactly what happened and who was responsible for the decision-making process, who was the person or the group of people who gave the orders, who are the ones that targeted this young man, where did the misinformation, because clearly it was misinformation, come from, and then why were the public, on the face of it, misled, and was that on purpose or not? Now, it seems as if none of these important questions have been answered, and that's why there is this feeling of outrage that is really going to continue unless those questions are answered by a proper public inquiry.
Well, I think that is what you said would happen. Mr. Tucker did say.
Well, I'm not sure if it's going to be a public inquiry. That's the difficulty.
Well, there's going to be, there will be a public examination of the facts through the trial of the Metropolitan Police under the health and safety legislation, which I accept may not go the full distance that communities may wish.
And the parameters of that trial will be very narrow indeed, because the parameters are set by the nature of the allegation and the summonses. And so quite rightly, the judge of that trial will stop defence counsel cross-examining beyond those very limited borders.
But I do think that there is a point here around the role of police officers, police firearms officers, and I am indeed a former firearms officer, and you make decisions, in very, very difficult circumstances. And in this particular incident, I mean, I feel desperate sympathy for the family of Jean-Charles de Menezes, and I wouldn't, but from the point of view of the police officers, they have been involved in something, truly dreadful for them as well. Their suffering is nothing like what the family of Jean-Charles is feeling, certainly. But
it's comparable, I wouldn't
but
say
their
it's more or
intention
less.
going, and I know this, that our intention going out to work is not to get involved in these sorts of incidents, but it's part of the operational, the operational world in which we live. And I feel that, to go to a public inquiry to investigate, which I personally wouldn't have any objection to, but to start identifying the officers, it would be really quite unfair.
Well, I think there are ways of having inquiries without identifying officers. It's been done in the Bloody Sunday inquiry, where a number of officers were not identified. So that in itself isn't the objection.
Sure.
Okay. Hello, who's calling Chai with Ritu?
Hi, it's Dylan speaking.
Hello, Dylan. Are you ringing from a mobile?
Something that happened to me.
Sorry, Dylan. Are you ringing from a mobile?
No, I'm actually ringing from
Okay, can you just speak up then?
Oh, sorry. Well, I just want to talk about something that happened a few months ago.
Yes.
I only passed my license a few months ago, and I was.
You only passed your driving license?
And I got stopped by the police.
You got stopped by the police, yes.
And for no apparent reason, and they actually searched my car because they thought I was in possession of marijuana.
Why would they think you're in possession of marijuana? Was it any...
No idea. And being a first time, because I just recently passed my test, I was actually just quite a scary experience because being pulled over by the police. And I was really unaware of how to act. And I don't know, I just felt really oppressed, basically.
So what did you feel, sorry, that you felt like you were a criminal?
Yeah, because for no apparent reason, I was stopped. And I was made to think as if I had done something wrong.
Okay.
Whereas I just didn't do anything.
David Tucker? do you want to reply to that?
Well, in the circumstances that you're describing, that would be under the first set of stop and search powers that we were talking about, where the officers would need to have reasonable suspicion, and there's quite a long list of information that you should be given. And again, this cuts two ways, because in some, for a lot of people, being stopped and searched by the police is very stressful. For them to then be given a whole load of information, a lot of which they're not going to be able to retain because it's so stressful. But what you should have been told at the time of the stop and search was that the grounds for the stop, the object for the stop, who the officers were, that a record was going to be kept, and that you were entitled to a copy of that record if you asked for it.
Okay, can we just ask, were you given all that information?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I mean, I can't possibly comment about individual cases,
No.
but I can tell you that is a summary of the information that you should have been given, and that a record should have been made, and that record should still be available afterwards. And if it isn't, then the officers are not complying with the law.
Okay, so what can Dylan do about this situation if he wasn't given all that information?
Well, he can make a complaint about that.
Mhm.
The other thing to do would be to see if you can get a copy of the stop and search record.
Okay, and otherwise that stop and search record will be kept, as you said, by the police for 7 years.
I think it's 6 or 7 years. I wouldn't want to.
Okay.
I think it is.
Okay, and if no further action is taken, I mean, he's not needed or wanted or anything else, then can he not ask for that record to be destroyed?
No, it's a record that we
retains.
keep. I mean, it is again one of these two-edged sword things. I'm beginning to get like a cracked record. But we are required by law to make the record, and having made the record, we are then required by law to retain it for a certain length of time.
Okay, did you get that, Dylan? Yeah, I did. Okay.
One of the complaints that I hear more and more frequently is a story like Dylan's, where
it's a very typical story, isn't it?
It's certainly not untypical,
Yeah.
and part of the problem is that the average person on the street doesn't know his or her rights. And the suggestion is, and I'm not sure how widespread this is, that a number of officers are stopping without giving full details and not even recording. Now, the difficulty with that, if it is happening, is that, of course, then no record gets kept, and so statistically that person never was stopped and searched. And so even if they complain, the answer from the recipient of the complaint will be, well, you were never stopped. What's the difficulty?
Yeah. Well, that is a double-edged sword, because if no record is kept, it then becomes an encounter, doesn't it, where the police can just stop you and ask you a few questions and then walk away.
No.
If you're stopped
and you are asked for an explanation of what you're doing, so if you are asked to account for your behaviour, then that counts as a stop and a stop and an encounter, and that should also be recorded. But we're back into the balance again between the feeling that somebody who's just been stopped and been asked, where have you just been, and then no further questioning, sorry, I was looking for somebody else, and then I've got to stop and record your name and and where you come from and all the rest of it. People find that deeply troubling as well. So, it's a real difficult one for us to balance here, and the law is the law, and we, I would hope that my colleagues can comply with it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for calling, Dylan. I hope that was useful for you. Thank you. Yeah, so, I mean, really the police are just doing their duty, aren't they? They're doing what it takes to enforce the law, but always subject to critical analysis by everyone else.
Yes, and I mean, I would hope that what we're doing has the broad support of communities, because whatever we're doing, we should be dealing with either driving down crime, driving down disorder, reassuring people, or dealing with terrorism.
Hello, who's calling Child with Ritu? Hello?
Hi, hello.
Hello.
It's Varun here from Ilford Lane.
Hello, Varun. Welcome to the show. How can I help you?
Hi. Yeah, I was just making a comment.
Yes.
It was about what's going on today.
Okay.
Because last week, my friends, they got stopped.
Why did they get stopped?
Yeah, when we were coming back from the cinema, and the police,
the
5-0, the Popo, they thought that my friends had fireworks when they didn't, and the problem was, was that my friends didn't know what to do. They didn't actually know what the law was, and they're 16 and under.
Okay.
So I think the problem here that we have is that we need to raise more awareness about what the law actually is.
Okay, I think it's a valid point.
I would
And
agree
who
with
do you
that.
think should raise the awareness? Hello?
I think, well, I remember they used to do it on the radio.
Yeah, there have been campaigns, I think, on...
Quite clear that people aren't really paying attention to it. So I think that what we need to do is publicise it more, especially in schools.
Okay, well, that's a valid point. Is that something that the police do, actually go into schools and explain what they mean? by
It's actually
stopping
not.
search?
There is a role for, I think, the police authority in doing that. I mean, clearly, if the police go into a school and say this is how the stop and search works, we sometimes get met with a measure of scepticism. And I think it probably needs to come from somebody different. I think school teachers or other people who've got credibility with young people to explain.
Superintendent?
Yeah.
Hello?
Could you please come to our school?
Okay, and where is your school, Varun?
It's in Ilford.
Okay. Well, maybe you can...
It's called Ilford County High School.
Okay. If you can write in, there is a website that you can go on and email me the school, and I can make sure that it's passed on to David Tucker here, and maybe he can then take it further. The website is www.chaiwithritu.com.
All right, thanks very much. That'll be wicked.
Email that. Okay. Thank you very much for calling, and keep watching.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love your show. It's really good.
Thank you, Varun. Take care now.
Well, that's 2 fans for this evening. Excellent. Good.
Reassuring to know, isn't it? You're not here on the firing line. You're just here because people do appreciate the fact that it's just lack of knowledge, isn't it? I mean, that's what he was saying.
Certainly after the Brixton riots, one of the things that came out in the Scarman report was that the public does need to be more vigilant, more educated. And it wasn't just a question of police officers educating, but also community groups, community lawyers, making sure that they're going out to the people and making sure that they know what their rights are. Sometimes that is seen as an aggressive act, but in fact it's an empowering act to know exactly where you stand. And that rather than actually creating conflict, that usually allows people to be more comfortable when they are stopped by the police, because they are less fearful when they are knowledgeable about what their rights are.
But maybe it's the general fear that people have of being stopped in the first place, that, you know, as soon as they are approached by a police officer, the fear comes up and they think, oh, he thinks I'm a terrorist, or, you know, the perception that I'm a criminal. Like the caller before, that his car he was stopped and searched and told he might have marijuana. I mean, why would someone think that?
It can be tremendously frightening. I myself was stopped twice, in fact, shortly
Let's
after
hear your experience.
shortly after the July bombings in London.
Yes.
I was stopped twice. One of them, I was on my way to the Crown Court at
right.
Isleworth, and it was done in a very polite way. But you still, for those few seconds when the police officer approaches you, even if you've done nothing wrong, and I happen to have my wig and gown in my bag for my court appearance, and even then, for those few seconds, I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? What have I done? And if I feel like that, then I'm sure that many other people who don't go into the Crown Court regularly, who don't know their rights, would feel doubly frightened.
But it is the younger callers who are feeling that way, the 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. So isn't it, I mean, how do you educate them at that level, you know, to understand, like you said earlier, there's 3 different types of stop and search and different types of powers. I mean, it's difficult enough for a criminal defence lawyer to, you know, get our head around all of it at any given moment. But for, you know, a lay person, a student, it's almost impossible, isn't it? As soon as you hear the word terrorism now, you'll think, oh my God, you know, it's the worst possible crime.
And of course, for most people, it's not an academic exercise. It's not, you know, for us here, it's something we have to do because it's our stock in trade, and these are the tools of our trade for me. For members of the public, these are wholly exceptional circumstances. This doesn't happen to most people, and when it does happen, they have no idea how to react or what's going to happen. So, and I think people feel humiliated as well to some extent, that they have been picked out and are now the subject of this very sort of intrusive procedure. So I think it is, you know, it's a real issue about how you deal with that in a subtle and sensitive way from the police officer's point of view. And from the public's point of view, it's not, you can't just tell people once about what the powers are. because it's got no context for them.
Okay,
So you have to tell them again and again and
yeah,
again
and
so that
just
people
for our
understand
viewers,
it.
can you just tell them when they can, in fact, be searched in a public place?
Well, they can be, I mean, any stop and search encounter can take place in a public place. The only time when it wouldn't is when you are removing more than the outer clothing. So if something was going to be, you know, if it was going to cause sort of any scale of immodesty, then that should take place in private and with somebody of the same sex as well.
Okay. We'll want to hear your views after the break. The number is 0871 990 3399. We are discussing stop and search. We want to hear your experiences and your views on the law, or anyone you know, a friend who might have been through it. Please pose your questions after the break. Thank you. Enjoy your chai with Ritu.
भागवती केरला ज्योतिष जग मशहूर पंडित तुलसीदास आजकल लेस्टर में है। ज्योतिष विद्या में निपुण पंडित तुलसीदास हस्तरेखा और कुंडली के जरिए आपका भूत, वर्तमान और भविष्य काल बता सकते हैं। साथ में संतान, दाम्पत्य जीवन, कारोबार, शिक्षण, घर शांति, आपके कई निजी और अनसुलझे प्रश्नों और समस्याओं को योग्य मार्गदर्शन देकर सुलझा सकते हैं। पंडित जी हिंदी, तमिल, तेलुगु, मलयालम और कन्नड़ा भाषा में बात कर सकते हैं। ज्यादा जानकारी के लिए संपर्क करें श्री पंडित तुलसीदास, 106 वेमथ स्ट्रीट, सनातन मंदिर के नजदीक, लेस्टर। टेलीफोन 0116 266 2539 और 07944253155।
To spread the word further, so here goes.
Akash Basmati is a low price. I repeat, Akash Basmati is a low price.
Akash Basmati बहुत ही सस्ता है.
Read all about it. Akash Basmati is a real bargain.
Akash Basmati is economical.
सांभळो, Akash Basmati बहुत सस्तु छे. Akash Basmati is real value for money. मैं क्या जी, Akash Basmati बहुत ही सस्ता है.
Akash Basmati available in different pack sizes.
हनुमान ज्योतिष मंदिर अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ख्याति प्राप्त पंडित राम प्रकाश जी आजकल इंग्लैंड में हैं। पंडित जी ज्योतिष विद्या और हस्तरेखा में निपुण हैं। वे आपको विवाह, पारिवारिक जीवन, संतान, दाम्पत्य जीवन, प्यार, व्यापार और कई समस्याओं के बारे में सलाह देंगे। ज्यादा जानकारी के लिए संपर्क करें 2 क्लेरमंट रोड, कैप हिल, स्मेथिक, बर्मिंघम B664JZ, ऑपोजिट आजडा, या अपॉइंटमेंट के लिए अभी कॉल कीजिए 0121 558 4470।
मैं अपने बेटे की पिटाई कर देता हूँ।
मेरी बेटी की सहेली हमेशा गुमसुम रहती थी। बात में उसने बताया कि उसका अंकल उसे अब्यूज कर रहा है।
हमारे नेबर अपने छोटे छोटे बच्चों को घर में अकेला छोड़ जाते थे।
खुद पे कंट्रोल ही नहीं रहता, फिर गिल्टी फील करता हूँ।
बेचारी एकदम टूट चुकी थी, मुझसे बर्दाश्त नहीं हुआ।
कई बार दिन भर भूखे रहते थे बेचारे। मुझे ये सब बर्दाश्त नहीं हुआ,
इसीलिए हमने हेल्पलाइन को कॉल किया।
बच्चे हमारा फ्यूचर हैं। बच्चों की तरफ क्रूएल्टी को रोकने के लिए NSPCC एशियन चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन हेल्पलाइन को 0800 096 7719 पर कॉल कीजिए।
Sometimes it's not our fault. We're involved in road accidents or accidents at work. People do not care about others. Medical procedures don't go as planned, or we may slip, trip or fall. But Diamond is always there to help. We assure compensation for your lost earnings, medical expenses and more. Call our 24-hour helpline at 0800 0328 777 for support. Diamond Accident Group.
Have you been injured in an accident or suffered as a result of medical negligence? At the Sethi Partnership Solicitors, we can advise on a no-win, no-fee basis. Think of a firm solicitors, think of the Sethi Partnership Solicitors. Call us on 0208 866 6464.
The SETI Partnership, we are in partnership with our clients.
A cooking competition. Fried onions of Nishan, first choice of modern housewife. Minced garlic. Minced ginger. Chef cutting onions laboriously. Chopped tomatoes, and the modern housewife adds spices of Nishan. The poor chef is still cutting onions while the curry is ready. Cook a tasty and fast curry with Nishan. Nishan. Fried onions, minced garlic and ginger by East End. The true taste of the East.
Hello, welcome back to Chai with Ritu. Don't forget to call 0871 990 3399. We'd like to hear your views on stop and search rules. We have two guests here today, David Tucker and Salish Mehta, who are discussing this topic with us. Oh, have a caller. Hello, who's calling Chai with Ritu?
So I'm Arun speaking.
Hello, Arun. Welcome to the show.
Yes, my question is that I got my passport is my Arun name, but on my license.
Sorry, can you speak up a bit? You got your...
my passport.
You got your passport, yeah.
Right? They got my full name.
With your full name, okay.
And my license, the driving license, it's got their surname on there. So if anytime please stop me, how I'm making them satisfied I am the same person, because how I show the identity.
Oh, right. So you've got your passport in your full name.
Yeah.
And your driver's license in another name.
Yeah.
Okay.
With my name is surname as well.
With your surname as well.
Yeah.
So your query is, which documents hold true?
Now, it both is true, but my surname not on my passport.
It's
when
not on
we
your
came
passport.
from India, there's my only name in there. But when I came in this country,
Right.
after I'm married, is my surname carry on. But I'm not seeing my surname on my passport yet.
Okay. What I would advise as a solicitor, and this is rather as a solicitor, and I won't pose the question to our two guests here, is that you would have to rectify your name as being the same name on all documents by a deed poll, which you can do, and choose whatever name you want to be known by in all your documents, and that way there is no confusion as to your identity or who you are.
It's carry on last 40 years.
Yeah, if it hasn't caused a problem so far, then that's not a problem. But if it ever does, that's the way around it. Okay? Thank you very much for calling. Okay, so I mean that's often a point we've had, discussed that for ID purposes, what is our ID? And going on to that, it appears now that there's this discussion about ID cards, and that seems to be the way forward. But last year when we visited America, and I know as soon as I got there, the first thing they took was an iris sample and a fingerprint, and I instantly objected to that, but there was nothing I could do because we were there on holiday. Is that the way this country is going, actually profiling people and having ID cards and knowing exactly where you are?
Well, I mean, we're into a fairly political debate now, and a party political debate, so I tend not to go in for it, but, the government at the moment seem to be in favour. And there are others who aren't, and to say it's party political, so I wouldn't really want to get involved in that.
What's your views on human rights?
Well, first I thought the ACPO were in favour of identity cards. That was my understanding of the head of ACPO when I last saw him being interviewed, but that may have changed. And of course,
how long ago was that?
That was only a few months ago when identity cards were to the forefront of political issues. And of course, the Labour Party, Labour government, appears to be committed to bring in identity cards in the distant future now, as opposed to the near future. The difficulty, of course, for any human rights lawyer is what use is going to be made of any information that the state has. And we all know from experience, not just of this country, but other countries, that whenever a government, however benevolent it is, however nice the government is, as soon as you start giving it more and more information, it'll use it, and sometimes it'll abuse it. And that is the real worry of human rights lawyers throughout the world, that the more power you give a government, the more information you give it, the greater the prospects of misuse. And the problem with handing over information and handing over more and more of the power that we have is that it never comes back. With each little piece of your own power, your freedom that you give over, you never get it back. And that's a real worry. Unless there is a very good legal and political and moral argument for it, generally the answer is don't. There's no need to give even more power to the state.
But it won't be our choice. It won't be a choice for people. It will be the government legislation, won't it, and having ID cards.
I suppose in the end it does become a choice of the people, depending on what's on the manifestos and what each party is saying at an election. And of course there are other ways that one can put pressure on governments. One of the reasons that Tony Blair, as Home Secretary, seemed to back off from ID cards, apart from cost, was the massive revolt that the Labour government thought they would get from their backbenchers and the House of Lords.
Well, it'll
And so
become
there
a
are
big brother state, wouldn't it, really?
Well, when you combine that with the large extra powers that the Terrorism Acts have given the state, when you combine that with the widespread use of cameras, I think there are something like more than 10 million cameras in this country.
Surveillance
and
everywhere.
Someone did a survey recently that your journey from home to work, you will be on something like 25 different cameras on average. When you add all of those little pieces together, all of those changes that have taken place in the last 10, 15 years, then you start to worry about how much power the state does have.
Yes. Yeah. Any views on that?
Well, only that there are certain things that we quite voluntarily give information about. You know, we go shopping. I use one of those little scanners in the supermarket.
And we do that unknowingly.
And to a great, well, I do it knowingly, and I think a lot of people do, and we don't worry about that so much. And so, you know, it's not all, you know, information isn't all terribly sinister. There are some good reasons to have it, but you know, I take the point. It's all a question around trying to develop a reasonable balance between people's liberty and preventing crime.
Just to ask you, I know there's been a comment made by the Hindu Forum that when any Hindu person has been a victim of crime, their crime has not been taken as seriously as someone from the same community or, you know, another community but within the Asian population. Is that something that the police are aware of? Are they aware that there's several different types of Asians all under the same bracket? Or do they actually know there's, you know, that there is or there aren't differences? Really, that's the question.
I would imagine, certainly where police officers are used to dealing with highly diverse communities, they will be very aware of the different communities within apparently similar communities. So yes, I think that we are aware of that. I'm not aware of any differences in the way that people are treated. I've always been concerned about the way that we classify people with brown skin as being Asian.
Well, not necessarily now. Brown skin is Brazilian, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
And would a police officer know that a man walking down the street with a turban is or isn't Sikh or Muslim or from a different sect? Would they know the differences?
They may not be able to tell you about the different sects, but I think they would be able to tell you about the different faiths, particularly if they worked in a very highly multicultural area like here. They would certainly be able to. In other areas of the country where the experience is not the same, then perhaps not. But I think here, yes, you would find that all of the police officers here are very, very well attuned to the changing communities and the dynamics within it.
And does the police force actually reflect the different diverse communities in the actual police force itself? Do you recruit from different ethnic minorities? How do you do it? Does it?
Well, we do, and we have targets which I feel we're not going to. Certainly, the Met is not going to achieve. It was we were set a target of achieving 25% of all our staff to come from minority ethnic communities by 2010 or 2011.
Right. And what is it at the moment? Do you know?
Well, looking at our recruitment rates, we are recruiting at something like 16% from minority ethnic communities into the police as police officers.
Into the Met or general?
That's in the Met.
Right.
And much higher percentage into other roles such as police community support officers. We find that we're getting over 30% of minority ethnic, and also very high levels of women who are joining the community support officers. So I think we're making a lot of progress, but we're certainly not at the stage where I would be saying, yeah, we do reflect our communities, you know, completely, and we've got a lot more work to do in that area.
How do you see the future, Sailesh, with the stop and search rules and general relationships with the police force?
Well, one of the aims of the Macpherson report was to ensure that there are more black minority officers. Many police forces aren't going to meet anywhere near the targets, and part of their problem, in fact, unfortunately, is that there have been so many high-profile cases of police officers who are black or Asian being discriminated against and being often a campaign of persecution against them. Now, I accept that these are very few and far between, but they're such high profile that it's put off people from being recruited into the police force. And so that's going to be a problem for the future.
Yeah, it appears that every time the police take any action, it's scrutinized to a large degree, and that's what gets highlighted. But I think you're doing a fantastic job, David Tucker. Thank you very much for coming. And Salish, thank you very much for attending. Well, that wraps up our show for today. Thank you very much for joining Chai with Ritu. Next week we will be talking about the film industry. How much impact has British Indians made into the British film industry in this country since we've been here since the 60s and 70s? Have we made any impact at all, or are we still on the fringes and still getting there? Well, I'd like to hear your views next week. Thank you very much for joining. Enjoy your chai. Thank you.